Not after all. Cut it. Giuliani also claimed the purpose of the trip wasn't to influence the 2020 U.S. election. The reality is that nothing to do with the election in 2020. If I wanted to meddle in that election, which I don't, I could have held this for a year and dropped it right before the convention. Then he decided not to go to Ukraine because, quote, I think I'm walking into groups that are enemies of the United States, whatever. So he says in response to a Chris Murphy tweet, reacting to the news, explain to me why Biden should be investigated if his son got millions from a Russian-loving, crooked Ukrainian oligarch while he was VP and point man for Ukraine. Ukrainians are investigating and your fellow Dems are interfering. Election 17 months away. Let's answer it now. So yeah, it seems to be pretty much broadly conspiratorial, but we'll of course follow the story here for you very closely on SWRN. All right, time now to shout out another presidential candidate who is not Bernie Sanders. I know, right? Crazy. We're going to play this clip from Elizabeth Warren, who really showing off her financial expertise here. Incredible stuff. Talking about the financial crash, again, 4 years before it happened.
And he's not that worried about household debt or that it's too much or that we might be getting in over our heads.
You know, I don't understand what Chairman Greenspan is reading in terms of the data. Let's talk about what's happened to families, not in the long past, just since the year 2000. Since the year 2000, credit card defaults, that is, people who are not making even the minimum monthly payment, up 55%. Home mortgage foreclosures, people who desperately want to keep up the payments on that one asset because if you don't, it means you're out on the street, up 45%. And bankruptcies, the ultimate declaration of financial death, that I can't make it anymore, up 33%.
I mean, pretty much it shows, like, if she's reading this to me, I'm no financial expert, believe me, but, like, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, it's not sustainable. It's really not sustainable. And the fact that this data was all publicly available, but everyone, for some reason, either chose or didn't just read it, chose to ignore it, just didn't read it, just didn't care, is absolutely incredible. And the fact that she kind of was able to look into this way back in 2004 and say, okay, this is a problem. She's not going to hear to PBS. Like, that shows, like, she knows this financial system. She knows the economy better than any candidate. That includes Bernie Sanders. Any candidate running, she will take this from the right perspective, in my opinion. I mean, sure, people are going to say, oh, she's too friendly with capitalism. I disagree. I think she's the perfect kind of moderate candidate that would be acceptable to both the left wing.
What was the
left wing and the kind of center wing of the Democratic Party. So, like, it's kind of a shame she won't win.
number one New Year's resolution this year?
What was it?
For the first time ever, overtaking lose weight. It was pay off some debt.
Yeah, I mean, it's overtaking, like, that she just picks that up. She reads, she understands this. Like, she knows, she's seeing things that, like, pretty much are publicly available to everyone, but everyone just chooses to ignore. Like, that's the incredible. She's not getting any secret data here. She's not looking through the mirror. Like, this is an unsustainable. This was an unsustainable. I mean, kind of still is, but like, this is a major problem she saw coming, and the fact that she's able to see this, and as president, she probably would have acted on it. Like, that's something. It's a huge merit for her. Like, she should be playing this clip, I think, in some of her ads.
I've got too much debt. I'm in trouble. I'm worried whether or not I can make my basic payments. Alan Greenspan, our national economic leader, has stood up for the last 4 years and told Americans, borrow against your house. If you can't close the gap at the end of the month, just borrow against your house. Now, he never called it borrow against your house. He said fancy things like tap your home equity, which sounds like some kind of dance or, some clever financial thing to do. But what it really was is borrow more money against your house and bet your house that you can continue to make all those payments. Do all that just as a way to make it to the end of the month, to put groceries on the table, to make that house payment, to keep the lights on. That's really scary financial advice for someone to be giving American families. And what frightens me is millions of American families have taken that advice.
Yeah, so great job by Elizabeth Warren here. Kind of like she should play that. Like she should say, okay, she saw this coming. She saw this. Like this was the big thing. I think she's in third place right now. I don't think she's in a very good position to win. But like still, so much credit to her for doing this and for actually she knows the economy better than anyone. I think that's undisputed at this point. Like she knows she's very smart on this, and like she is the senator to trust in this race about the economy, not Bernie and anybody else, especially not Joe Biden. Like they know, like she knows what's going on. That's for sure. So credit to her for this. Like really kind of almost futuristic sight ability she seems to have. All right, since we are speaking of Joe Biden, let's talk about him a little further. Joe Biden's pollster has signed up to lobby against labor for Trump's NAFTA 2.0 deal, and this is again kind of proving like the double-sided, the two faces of Joe Biden. Like I feel like he knows what he has to do to win. Like he understands, or at least his advisors understand the realities of the situation. Like they know what he has to say, they know what he has to do, the places he has to visit. Which also unfortunately include some pretty rich people. But this Intercept has a great story about this, about John Anzalone, who's an advisor and pollster for Joe Biden. Yeah, so he's an advisor and pollster for Joe Biden, is working for an industry-funded lobbying group formed to help pass out President Donald Trump's NAFTA 2.0, which the unions have thus far opposed. The announcement was first made in Political Playbook. Anzalone is the president of the Anzalone List. He works for a prominent Democratic polling firm. He is joining TradeWorks for America, an organization co-founded by Mark Short, who's now the Vice President Mike Pence's chief of staff. So it's a pretty Republican thing. He was also, I think, the former director of legislative affairs for the White House. Funding from the group, which expects to spend $15 million to $20 million, comes from the pharmaceutical industry, oil and gas, and the automotive industry, as well as traditional GOP donors. Yeah, so TradeWorks has bipartisan co-chairs, the former Republican Association Executive Director, Republican Governors Association Executive Director Phil Cox, and former North Dakota Senator Heidi Heitkamp, a Democrat. Last year when she was in office, Heitkamp declared NAFTA 2.0, which Trump had termed as a United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, quote-unquote, disappointing. Anzalone, as a pollster, isn't required to register as a lobbyist if he doesn't spend a significant amount of time talking directly to lawmakers or their staff. So that's his kind of loophole. But it shows you, again, like these people, how easily corruptible they are, and how easily they're going to fall like right back in this trap. Like, and that shows you again that Joe Biden's pollster is incredibly sketchy. Joe Biden is also incredibly sketchy. I think the most amazing quote I've ever, probably one of the most amazing quotes I've ever seen, was what he said about bundling. He's like, yeah. I mean, if someone bundles you at $50,000 for me, like, I'd say, come on in, please. I don't care who you are. Like, imagine, like, all you got to do is just give him $250,000. Like, a bunch of people who could very influence Joe Biden to do very bad things are capable of giving him $250,000 and just having him walk right in. But the average person, no, is not capable of doing that, which is the big problem, obviously. Yeah, so anyway, Union Chair Heitkamp's prior assessment that is disappointing. Like, before she got all the money, they kind of agree with Heitkamp. This was disappointing. AFL-CIO formally announced opposition to the USMCA in its current form in March, saying, quote, that NAFTA renegotiation requires strong labor rights provisions and enforcement provisions that, as of today, look like they're not yet in agreement. The statement read, the agreement also locks in protections for certain pharmaceuticals, which progressives had loudly opposed. Biden himself sought a position as a union stalwart, kicking off his campaign at a Teamsters local and winning the endorsement of the International Association of Firefighters. But he's also held his first fundraiser hosted by a union-busting lawyer. And this week, he's held another fundraiser in Los Angeles at the home of Kaiser Permanente, the hospital chain mired in a labor dispute with the National Union of Healthcare Workers. Healthcare workers picketed the Biden fundraiser on Wednesday, and now his pollster has joined an organization dedicated to pass a trade agreement labor unions are against. So he's actively going to be speaking about hurting labor, like, if you think about it, his pollster. So yeah, Biden has also set himself up for really to be almost the entirely opposing force to Trump, while his pollster set himself like to be almost entirely in opposition to Trump, while his pollster pushes to get Trump a win on trade policy, a signature issue for the president, which is also kind of funny. Oni Hernstadt of the International Association of Machinists laid out or machinist, or however you want to say it, sorry, pretty much laid out labor's opposition to the USMCA. There's no funding for enforcement or monitoring in the agreement. The labor standards are framed as as principles rather than actual rights. The labor standards are framed as in the field, not involving trade or investment, don't have to abide by them. So also, workers can get employers who violate the agreement sanctioned on their own. So, yeah, and that's not going to really work too well. So that's pretty much the big problem. So labor standards are framed as principles. Fields not involving trade or investment don't have to abide by them, which is a lot of fields, guys. I don't know if you knew that. Workers cannot get employers who violate the agreement sanctioned on their own. It's not even clear whether murder of a trade union activist would qualify as a USMCA violation, since the violations must occur periodically and repeatedly. So, yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. But the point is, like, this is who Joe Biden is. Like, he's really trying, I think, who he is when he has these kind of pollsters, these people who he hires who are just so focused about making money, and they don't even care about the person they're working for and his direct. Like, I just don't trust him. I just don't trust him. I don't see why anyone does about how much he wants to support unions. Like, I don't see how I would really like to talk to someone who's like out there as a voter who thinks, yeah, Joe Biden supports unions. Like, I can't see how it would make sense to anyone, literally anyone who's there watching the scene, et cetera, like, it just seems to be like literally insupportable, absolutely insupportable. TradeWorks for America has been talking up the agreement on Capitol Hill, claiming it will support 14 million jobs. As economist Dean Baker has noted, as an analyst for the U.S. International Trade Commission, estimate the USMCA would add 0.02% of gross domestic product to the economy per year, and an statement that would be essentially invisible, or an increment that would essentially be invisible. And those increases are only secured through the greater certainty for business investment, which makes no sense since there already is a trade agreement in place between Canada and Mexico, and has been in place really for a quarter century. Other politicians turned lobbyists working to pass the USMCA include former representative or holder of AOC seat, Joe Crowley, remember him, former Republican Representative Eric Paulson, and former Obama administration Commerce Secretary Gary Locke. Great job, Obama. Always hiring the best guys there. Separate coalition to working on passing the deal includes AT&T, John Deere, Kraft Heinz, and the American Petroleum Institute, as well as the National Restaurant Association, with co-chair lobbyists who work for Cargill, Citigroup, Fiat Chrysler, and UPS. So that is fun. So fun stuff. Just to give an idea about Joe Biden, what he's doing, who he really is. And yeah, with that, we're going to turn to a little bit more of a funny story. I don't know if this is like Schadenfreude or whatever, but still, it's pretty funny. Or maybe I'm using that word incorrectly too. Whatever, folks, whatever. A GoFundMe page called We Build the Wall has managed to raise over $22 million, a staggering amount of money, from hundreds of thousands of donors over the past 5 months. Run by an Indian immigration triple amputee, Iraq War veteran named Brian Kolfage. He promises to build segments of President Donald Trump's wall on private land across the southern border for a fraction of what it cost the government. The page received nearly $13 million in just 5 days after it was launched late last year. One snag, though, is to date that there has been no sign of any groundbreaking occurring on the project, despite promises that Kolfage would start it late in April. Now some donors are beginning to expect no way that they possibly maybe could have been duped here. The Daily's piece, Will Summer, reported donor concerns on Friday, saying, or writing that since We Build the Wall blew their April deadline, Twitter replies to Kolfage and the group's Facebook page have been filled up with angry donors. One reason public confidence was built around the page is that the well-known pro-Trump conservatives have signed on the project, including former Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach and former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon. Last January, Kolfage told the New York Times he secured land from landowners, and he said the groundbreaking process would begin within weeks, but like most deals with the project, Kolfage has kept his plans shrouded in secrecy. According to Summer, the reporter there, Kolfage said in March that he couldn't reveal locations where the wall would be built because the ACLU, groups that would want to sue and impede our progress. But last December, maybe because he just doesn't know what the location